Hey everybody, Coaching Beyond with Coach Sagasta, and this is a special segment of Coaching Beyond, a little bit further than normal. For many people that do follow me both on Twitter, um, LinkedIn, Facebook, also on YouTube, and uh, and Snapchat. I wanted to expose a little bit about behind the scenes, back who I am. For many people, because I've had a few comments actually come back and ask, Coach Sagasti, can you get a little bit more in depth about who you are personally? And so I most definitely will. As some people have gone through some of my videos, I made videos certainly recognizing my long term of marriage. I've been with my wife for 18 years, and we've been married 17 years. And has it all been peachy? Absolutely not. She has had to endure. No, excuse me, one second. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. She's had to endure. Basically, she's had to, adapt to the things that I had to go through as a kid. And what I mean by that is, my wife has had to grow in understanding what had happened to me as a kid. She being, I mean, I've been with my wife longer than she's been single. You get what I'm saying? So, like, from the time we got married, I mean, she was 16 years old. I was 18 when we got married. So, I mean, we've been together for a very long time. And she had to definitely gravitate of what had happened to me as a kid. She wanted to know why I was rebellious, why I chose drugs, why I chose alcohol, why I was so involved in the flesh. What I mean is by the lust of women. Why did I look after women? Why did I have such a lustful eye? You know what I'm saying? And I look more today, at our marriage being so strong because of all the things that we've gone through early in our marriage. I could definitely honestly say that, it brings me to shame. But at the same token, we go through trials and tribulations in life. We go through the fire to be brought this diamond, And so I share with you, some of our trials and tribulations, but more so in depth, more about what was back behind my heart, and what things that were troubling me psychologically and physically and emotionally, and even spiritually. There were some things that were weighing down. For those that don't know, I grew up in Riverside, California. Riverside, California is Southern California, and so yeah, I was definitely one of those kind of kids growing up, California kid, but much different. And what I'm saying is, growing up in Riverside, California at a young age was exceptional if you had both parents. It was a great time if you had both parents. For me, I didn't have both parents. I only had a mother. And my mother at times didn't take care of me because my mother at times had her own psychological problems. I don't know what they all were, but I can tell you from the experience of what I had gone through in life, that I could definitely see now today, how my mother was definitely psychologically not there. But at an early age, I used to run from home. I used to basically control my mom. She would sit in a dark room, and my mother had Alzheimer's, and she also had severe depression. And my mother was late in her age when she had me. So I mean, I was the baby of the family. I have 5 half brothers and 1 sister. One of my half brothers did commit suicide on the banks of the Colorado River in 1986, I believe it was October of 1986, in Bullitt City, Arizona. And that's exactly where I'm presently at today. And so I always say that life brings you back to the beginning of certain things. So nonetheless, so my mom had all these complications, and growing up with it, it was definitely challenging as a young child to grow up around an environment where your mother is definitely severely in depression mode, and sometimes sitting in dark areas and just off into space. There were times where I had to feed myself, or I'd go to the neighbor's house and forage for food, different things. When my mother was okay, she'd work at the deli down the street, so she had an account. So sometimes I'd go there and just get a sandwich or whatnot, or get candy and put it on her account. Just crazy things that I used to do as a kid. And I'd work across the street. I would sometimes ditch school to go work across the street at this hydraulic shop. There was a hydraulic shop. The name was called Exclusive, and I used to go there and literally, and work there, and the gentleman the owner would actually pay me cash, and but it got further in depth, as far as pain and struggle doing this, because it was the number of years that that man molested me, over and over again, on numerous accounts. And I remember vividly how the accounts would take place, and I could draw them out, but let's not waste any time, and bridging this imaginative horrible event that happened to me. But I can definitely tell you that it was a scar in my life for many, many years, and I can tell you that through that pain has absolutely been able to. I've used that pain to push me to different things in life, and utilize that pain to greater things and to helping others. So as I said earlier in our conversation, that some of the trials that we go through in life they're exceptional, and some people it's hard for you to actually to definitely see that. I think one of the most exceptional parts that I think about is kind of like that. Oh, what would you say? It would be the pre the I guess the prefrontal area of our brain that holds, like the philosophical problems and stuff like that we go through. And I look at that and say, you know what, that was an absolute problem for me that I couldn't solve. And as much as I told people about what was happening, it was almost like I was talking to a wall. There were deaf ears. And I look back on it as because I was a trouble kid. I was running amok. I was doing my own thing. So people they didn't take me very seriously. I can definitely say that shortly after that, I was placed in foster care. Well, I was placed in the hands of my sister. And my sister couldn't take care of me. She had her own problems. She had her own children she had to look after. And I remember vividly she leaving me out in this corner, Victorville, on the sidewalk with a bag of clothes, and placed me in foster care. And I was placed in foster care for a number of years. I was a runaway. I never liked being a foster parent. Why? Because I was a kid that was searching for his mother. I wanted my mom. I wanted that home. I wanted a foundation. And I can definitely tell you, running away from my foster home, my first foster home was in Barstow, California, and I remember running away and literally being without shelter. I didn't have no shelter. I slept in a boxcar one time, until I don't know what you guys call them, but around here they call them, the dog hound, and they would come driving through, and if they seen a boxcar that was open, or if there was a link that was broke off, they would definitely investigate. And I remember hearing the car driving up, and I boogied, man. I got roughed into the brushes, hit in the dark, and I never stole anything. I just was looking for shelter. I was always looking for a place to stay, warm bed. And finally, I got connected with some friends. I considered them friends because they let me sleep on their couch and in their home or in their car. But for a number of months, this went on, and I was placed into another foster home in Victorville, California, and I was there but a short time also. Very deceitful placement because, once again, here I wasn't aware of what my surrounding was. I didn't know the people that well. And, for the social services to drop me off, it's they do it all the time. And so I was placed in this care, and I stayed there for about a month, and then I was back out running away again. And I slept in a school setting, slept inside the slides, the enclosed slides. I was sleeping there. I'd break into the vending machines to eat. I had skinny arms, so I'd put my hands in there and grab sodas or whatever I could to drink. And shortly after, I was picked up by San Bernardino County Sheriffs, and I was placed into custody again. And so I sat in the custody of San Bernardino County Sheriffs for a short bit time, and then I was placed into an orphanage. And when I was placed in this orphanage, I knew that was actually the last time I would ever get the opportunity to run, only because there was, basically surveillance. There was counselors, mentors there that were a 24-hour shift. So there was no sneaking away. Somebody was always up doing something. So it was quite different, and I shared a home with 8 boys, and I had a room that was 2-door room, and it was in Grand Terrace, California, where I actually started learning a little bit about myself. And I went to counseling. I never opened up in counseling. Very little small bits and pieces of the crumbs what I give the counselor, and I never gave her everything. I had this. I had to hang on to this energy. I had to hang on to what I thought was my actual my walls, my enclosure. Like I could only give out so much bread to the peasants, you know what I'm saying? And so that's exactly what I was doing, was giving out little small bits and pieces of information to peasants. And finally, about 2000, well, I'm sorry, about 98 when I graduated, again, I was homeless again. I had no place to go because I had no family. My sister abandoned me, and I never talked to her. So I went and lived on my friend's couch for a while, and then for somehow or another, my half brother, got in touch with me, and I moved out to Boyd City, Arizona. Here, I would definitely seek a little bit more. I was seeking, an outlet. I was looking for an outlet, and in '98, I just went right back into the workforce. Um, you know, there's a dire need for people that are going through so many trials and tribulations in life and so many struggles, and how to point you in the right direction is absolutely very, very there's great need there, great leadership, and so I definitely expressed that, because when I moved here in '98, I was spending all my money. I gave a little bit of money to my stepbrother, my half brother, for letting me stay with him, and I was blowing my money on drugs and prostitution and nightclubs and stuff like that. Yeah, definitely. I'm saying that's kind of what I was living up to, and finally I met this gal, my wife today, and basically in order to court her or to have any type of fellowship or hold her hand, I had to go to church. And so I had been through different religious organizations, or I don't know what you want to call them, but I've been to different churches, and it was an exceptional moment. She would get pregnant, and it was immediate tradition that you get married. As far as I knew, and it was in her family's tradition that you of course got married before, but it didn't happen this way. Foolish mistakes happen when you're young, and so she was pregnant, and it was time to get married. I was 18 years old. You know, um, it was an interesting time. It was because I was still running amok, still doing my own thing, and still being rebellious. Still had a heart of selfishness, and a heart of cynicism, and jealousy. So ultimately, I had to marry this woman because she was bringing in my son or my daughter, but she was pregnant. And so getting married, she was a kid for herself. She was 16 years old, And so we ended up getting married. And shortly after we got married, I left my wife for a number of months, and I wanted to live my own life. I wasn't ready to be bound, if you can think of it like that. I wasn't ready to be bound by chains, because that's how some people take marriage. But that's how I felt at the time. I was like, I don't want to be bound by chains, so I broke free and went and got my own apartment, and worked and drank and was doing drugs, and trying to sleep at night. And finally, I came to a crashing halt. I came home, and I was very intoxicated, and I went to a party and almost killed myself coming home. And at that point, it's like I knew that, there's an omnipotent power, an infinite power, a creator, a God. My God is definitely saying, it's time for you to get right. And so I went back begging on my hands and knees to my wife, and she forgave me. Now, case in point is forgiveness, forgiving and forgetting are far from each other, very far from each other. So my wife, has definitely in the 17 years, I've built that trust back into my wife. And it's been an exceptional time. Not saying that, there's never been a debate or an argument, because I would be a fool to say something like that to you. But I can definitely say, in the process of us growing together, we've definitely sensed, they say we're positive, we're a positive and negative attract, I could definitely sense that, that she was attracted to me and I was attracted to her. And so we just kept growing and growing and growing and growing in this unity, a strong bond, and a strong alliance for one another, unbreakable, unbreakable. And she has definitely since then has forgiven me. She has never forgotten. Those are things that you never forget, and including myself, like the memories of being abused as a child, physically and emotionally, going through all that, and it affected, if you could picture right now, if you could definitely picture your mind, as a hemisphere, kind of like the Earth. You get this hemisphere. Well, the right side was basically all that negative energy I was holding in, and it was the same thing with my heart. I was holding all this negative information, just negative stuff that had happened in my life, even with my marriage in the early beginning, and I was still rebellious. Like I went and worked construction, and I was working construction. I got back with my wife. I was working construction, and somehow or another, I drove an individual home, and next thing you know, literally, like I was exposed to him beating his wife, and as I engaged in the affair, I was immediately in the driver's seat driving his wife or fiance at the time. I can't quite remember, but I could tell you that she was holding the baby in her hand as I sped out the apartment. Once again, San Bernardino County Sheriff's picked me up. This time I was under the influence. I was recklessly driving, and I was in child endangerment and driving without a seatbelt. So I had about 4 or 5 accounts held on me, and they took me off to jail. I was hauled off in jail, and I sat in the jail for a number of days. And I got a call, and I called my wife, and first my mother-in-law answered, and my mother-in-law hung up on me, and I called back, and my wife finally answered. And I sat there and I cried like an infant, wondering, why is this happening to me? Begging for her to forgive me. Once again, this is strike two going into this relationship, and this is not too long after what had just happened prior to that, and me leaving her. So I mean, again, there was a bridge, a gap, and most women, you'd say, you know what, this dude is messed up. I'm out. I'm out of here. They would quit. They would give up. Today, we see a lot of relationships like that, but this woman stuck it out. And I believe it's by faith, it's by God's own purpose. But we stuck it out. So I stayed in jail, and rather than attain an attorney, a public attorney, I actually stood before myself, and I represented myself, and I laid it down on the table. Now, beg to differ. Before I went and seen the judge, I sat and I prayed in my cell, and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and then I ate, and then I prayed, and the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm just praying, and I'm removing this stuff from my life, bits and pieces. I'm knocking down the walls from my castle of comfort, and as I said, it was the right part of the hemisphere of my brain that was holding all this negative energy, and so I let it go. I started letting pieces of it go. And, with depression, anxiety, and fear and worry, all this other stuff, I started letting it all go. And one of the things that, that happens when I defended myself, I laid it all down on the table. I told the judge, this is exactly what took place this night. And he's seen everything. And the only thing I had to do was pay my restitution for reckless driving, and go see counseling for alcohol. And so I'd go to those classes, and I would sit in those classes, for 8 months. I'd sit in those classes, and I remember being in the orphanage, and I was actually had to go to those classes too, for being caught with marijuana. So I had to go to these classes, and I would sit in these classes in Needles, California, as a young adult, and listen to other people tell their stories, and it always captivated me, And I didn't speak until I think 2 or 3 months into the program, I started talking about, different situations and different problems of being so young. I used to just listen, and I always tell people, like, the biggest form of communication is listening. And so I listened to everybody's story, and I would pick up on it, and basically mentally write notes in, And so shortly after that, after I paid my restitution, after I went to all my classes, I figured, I'm going to get sober now. And so I started staying clean. I started going to church more. I actually got involved with with the choir, and I started singing, and that was a wonderful time, you know. But I had seen, you know, an individual that we say that, you know, a man of God that stand behind a pulpit, you know, disappear. A man that I grew very close to disappear, and another man that I would definitely grow very close to. In fact, I'd spent 7 years of biblical history under him, and then he would definitely remove himself from this area and move back to Minnesota. But in all that, I was learning. All the stuff I was learning, I was soaking it up like a sponge, right? Different information from everywhere. So I took the events that happened that day in Needles, as I was sitting before those men in that room and listening to these individuals talk about their trials and tribulations and their sorrows and their times of woe, and I would use it and I would utilize it like, yo, this is the time of learning. This is the time where I reflect on learning and building myself and knocking down the walls, that hemisphere, that, you know, that right hemisphere of my brain, knocking down doubt, knocking down procrastination, knocking down depression, knocking down, you know, anxiety, knocking down all these things, you know. And it took time, But in 2015, or I'm sorry, in 2010, I would be at you know, at a time where I was basically jobless, because in 2008 we lost everything. Me and my wife lost everything as a family. We had 2 kids, and we lost everything. We lost our home. I lost my 401k. Um, yeah, that was our first home, you know, and it was our first home. It was our first brand new car, and you know, it was a trying time. You know, here I was with 2 kids and lost 401k, lost my job. The market dropped, you know, and yeah, it was a trying time. You know, at that time, I didn't consider myself a man. You know, I let all this happen. You know, and it was like, you know, all the stuff that I was learning, I couldn't use it to I wasn't able to figure out how to use that stuff to make something happen. You know, to find a solution, to find a strategy for something. You know, this problem was just boom, just right on us. We lose everything. And so we were homeless, you know, and thankfully, thank God so much, man, that my in-laws opened up the door. We, you know, when we stayed there for a bit, about a year, we stayed with them until we found another home. And we would be in that home. And shortly after that, you know, I would be employed at a school, at an institution of education. And you know, I was going to college and I dropped out. You know, I was going to college, and as I was getting ready, going on my 3rd year, I dropped out. I said, you know what, I can't continue avoiding my family and going to college and still not having a great career in my life. And you know, and going through, I was learning psychology, and I was wanting to know why my mom was the way she was, why some of my family were the way they were, and why I had so much of this anger and frustration still in my heart, and all this doubt and depression and anxiety on my mind. And how come I couldn't solve the problems that I was going through? And so after being at the school, I thought it was the best thing. There were teenagers, there were kids. I volunteered as a coach, spent the whole year, 2010, and then became fully involved with the school in 2011. Win my first state title. It made my heart just boom, just flutter open with love and appreciation and gratification for everything in life. And so I'm in 2010 when I met this individual by the name of Dr. Eric Thomas, that really pushed me even a niche more. And every single day I was stitching my wounds and I was sewing them up, you know, and, you know, let the story be told. But, you know, for many years I was still sewing, and I was still finding myself, and I was still solving the problems that I had in my own life. I stopped looking at the world's problems and started solving the problems within. And it was definitely a time of realization. Like, you know, that's when I started figuring out, like, yo, you know, the left hemisphere of my brain was all positive, was all, you know, sociable, was all, you know, enthusiasm. And I started just like impressing that onto my life internally. And so I share that with you because I want you to know a little bit more about who I am, you know, a little bit about where I come from. You know, I've definitely lived in the streets, and I have scars. You know, I could show you. I call them scars. I don't call them tattoos. I call them scars. I don't call them tattoos. That's a conformant word. but they're scars. They're scars for life. They don't go anywhere unless you decide to take them, And so I use these scars, like the internal ones, and I use them for greatness. I push them, and use them, But I want to get back to in 2012, as I kept following this individual, I started taking out things out of my life. I started deleting certain things in my life. 2015, I made an absolute promise. I made an absolute promise before God, before my family, and within the universe of expression, that I would make the rest of my life the best of my life, that I would use my pain to push me to greatness, and that I would really truly believe with all my heart that when you want to succeed as bad as you want to, as bad as you want to breathe, then you'll be successful. And I took that story and I utilized it in my life, and I pressed it upon the kids in 2011, 2012, 2014, and the reason why I didn't say 2013 is because I was removed. I was removed from a different coaching standpoint and put to another one. So, but I can tell you that every single essence of my coaching, from sports to life to mentorship, has all been that has been utilizing your pain to push you to something greater. Go through the fire. Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, get on the other side. Go through the valley of hell, but get to the other side. Don't stand there and get burnt. There's no purpose for that. And it's so true. Carbon, the diamond, is with carbon, but it can never be a diamond without going through the fire and being pressed and pressure and pressure and pressure, and then boom, you got this beautiful diamond. So that's exactly what it's come down to. It was a long time of pressure, and in 2015, when I made that full commitment, that full promise unto God, and that I was going to definitely change my life and make the rest of my life a learning process, be a learner and be an influencer and be a mentor and be the coach beyond. That's why I came up with the company Coaching Beyond, because I'm no more coaching from the field anymore. I'm not coaching from the field anymore. I'm now coaching, from the heart. So from my heart to your heart. And that's exactly what I do each and every single morning. Most people that are starting to understand and see me, I don't script anything out. I leave it. I leave it in the faith. I leave it in the benevolence. I leave it in, in the divine God to give me the words to speak each and every single morning. I never ask anybody to write my stuff. I don't ask for an editor. I don't have a huge party to sit behind me. I do have a council. I have a very strong council. And I'm definitely thankful for the influence and friends that I have today. And, in the process of this growth, I've been able to delete friends. And this process of growth, I've actually watched my family grow. My daughter's 9 years old and she's finished Think and Grow Rich. Now, I'm not saying that to be arrogant, but I'm saying, like, I made a promise. I barely got through college, barely with the C, barely. I mean, I was a C average kid in high school, between a D and a C. You could look at the transcripts. I'm not up here. I'm not a Harvard individual. I'm not a Yale individual. I'm not any of the collegiate colleges or Ivy elite colleges. I'm not at that level. Will I be at that level? I can be if I want to be, if I choose to be. You see, one thing I take away from Marcus Aurelius, he says, we are the thoughts that we continue to think on each and every single day. And that's a fact. But there's something much greater in life than the education of institutes. And don't get me wrong, I think it's phenomenal. I think it's great if you truly want that, if you're truly chasing that, if that is truly on your heart. It's got to be exceptional for you. You have to be on thought on this. I mean, we see a lot of kids, almost 67% of college grads that come out and they're jobless. At one point in time, it was 78%, or 88% of college students would come out without a degree or without a job. And so I share it with you because, I mean, I barely got to school. I never knew how to read. I didn't like reading. I never had the structure, the discipline to say, hey, sit down and read a book like my kids do. As I said, my daughter's 9 years old, and she's already read Think and Grow Rich, and now she's on Dr. Thomas's book, and she's reading Greatness is Upon You. And I told her, once you read that book, then I'll let you go back and read, The Secrets to Success. I'm very happy and grateful and blessed to have such a strong core of my why. And for those that don't know what your why is, you have to really define what your core is and what your why is, because your core is your balance, but your why is something that very, 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 very valuable to you and your growth and where you want to be in life. And I can definitely express, the more that you see my shows, the more that you'll start to see that growth transfer. I mean, my very first video, I think, was back in, I want to say 2011 or maybe 2010, and I was doing something around my Jeep. I bought a Jeep, and I was cleaning the wheels, and I was using toothpaste as an illustration of how different types of toothpaste bring a different enamel off your teeth, and how some are actually bad for you. But I showed how one could definitely polish up your rims, you know what I'm saying? So I expressed that, but that was like my first video, and aside from the ones that I did in our home, and I did them on YouTube because Facebook back then didn't even have an actual an ability for a live back then. In fact, YouTube didn't even have the opportunity to go live. So I mean, it's these platforms are very exceptional. It depends on how you use them. As for me, I use them for educational purposes. I use them for influence and motivation and inspiration for the day. So I definitely thank you so much for tuning on and getting to know a little bit more about Coach Sagasta and who I am, and where I am and where I'm going, because my future, my destiny that I have envisioned is to be able to reach hearts around the world, not just here in America, not just here in Arizona, not just here in Boise City, Arizona, but around the world. I want to collaborate with some of the best. I want to surround myself with some of the best people and be able to speak with them at different parties and be able to help transfer information to other people, that they might take that information and transform their present status into something much more phenomenal. So that's kind of the promise, that's the premonition for this next year, is to work diligently, be very diligent with what I'm doing with Coaching Beyond. And definitely express the core of who we are, and let you guys run wild with it, and in that process, definitely spend time mentoring individuals in the process. I've spent 6 years, 11 months, 1,100 hours of self-actualization. All through school, I was learning. All through before I started school, I started learning. My first book was Think and Grow Rich. Shortly after that was Greatness is Upon You, or Secret to Success and Greatness is Upon You, and some books by Bob Proctor. But I also, been a very devout individual about the scriptures within King Solomon's principles. I've been very, very accepted in learning those principles and how people of today's society has used those principles to be successful in life. So there's a whole lot of things back there that have definitely serenaded very well with me and have absolutely helped to identify the leadership traits that I have, that tact, you might say, the tact of being a great leader and being phenomenal for my family and for people around the world. So I appreciate you guys' time. I thank you so much for paying attention and watching. I thank you so much for sharing. Many blessings, and make the rest of this new year. You only got 31 days, and this year is done. So I mean, you got a head start. So let's make 2017 great. Let's make 2017 phenomenal. Let us both at the end of 2008, same time next year, that we can promise each other that 2017 is going to be an excellent year. So think about that. All right. Remember, what does it say back there? You have to be the change you want to believe. So think about that. Have a great and beautiful day.